Whitford Mansion, a name that sends shivers down the spine of anyone who hears it. The old Whitford Mansion stood on a hill, looming over the town like a dark sentinel. Overlooking the town, it was a grand house once. A symbol of wealth and prestige, it was the pride of the Whitford family. Now it was a decaying skeleton of its former self. The walls, once pristine and white, were now cracked and crumbling. Vines crawled up its walls like grasping hands, slowly reclaiming the structure for nature. Windows were boarded shut like frightened eyes that had seen too much. The once vibrant gardens were now overgrown and wild. Locals whispered stories about the mansion, tales of eerie lights and strange sounds that emanated from within its walls. They said it was haunted. No one dared to go near the place, especially after dark. Not after what happened to the Whitford family. The family that once brought life to the mansion had vanished without a trace. They disappeared one night, leaving no trace. Their belongings were left untouched, as if they had simply vanished into thin air. Only whispers remained, whispers of strange noises and cold spots that would send chills down the spine of anyone who dared to enter. Whispers of ghostly figures in the windows, seen only in the dead of night. The mansion stood as a silent warning, a reminder of the unknown horrors that lurked within, a testament to some unseen horror. A place where the past and the present seemed to collide, leaving an indelible mark on the town and its people. The gate, rusted and creaking, seemed to groan under the weight of its own history. Inside, the rooms were filled with dust and cobwebs, the furniture covered in white sheets like ghosts of the past. An old cracked mirror reflected shadows that seemed to move on their own, adding to the eerie atmosphere. As dusk fell, the mansion took on an even more sinister appearance, its silhouette stark against the darkening sky. A single flickering candle in one of the rooms was the only sign of life, though no one knew who or what had lit it. The town below, with its lights turning on one by one, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the night to pass. The mystery of the Whitford Mansion remained unsolved, a dark chapter in the town's history that no one dared to revisit. And so, the mansion stood, a dark silhouette under the moonlight, a place where the past refused to be forgotten. A new arrival. Ethan, a young man with a thirst for adventure, arrived in town. He was drawn to the mansion on the hill. The stories didn't scare him, they intrigued him. He wanted to see for himself if the rumors were true. He decided to spend a night in the mansion. He would face the darkness, uncover its secrets. Armed with only a flashlight and a notebook, he approached the house. The sun was setting, casting long shadows. The mansion seemed to loom over him. A shiver ran down his spine, but he continued on. Stepping inside, the old oak door creaked open as if it hadn't been touched in decades. Ethan stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and the smell of decay. Cobwebs hung from every corner, shrouding the room in a ghostly veil. He shone his flashlight around. The furniture was draped in white sheets like ghosts themselves. He could hear the sound of his own breathing. Each breath echoed in the silence. He took a step forward, his shoes crunching on the dusty floor. He was committed now. There was no turning back. Whispers in the dark. As Ethan explored the mansion, he started to hear things. Soft whispers seemed to follow him from room to room. He would stop and listen, but the sounds would vanish. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He found his way to the grand ballroom. A chandelier hung from the ceiling, its crystals dull with age. He imagined the room filled with music and laughter. Now, only an eerie silence filled the air. He swore he saw a figure out of the corner of his eye, a fleeting shadow that disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. Eyes that follow. Ethan continued his exploration, each room more unsettling than the last. He found a room filled with portraits of the Whitford family. Their eyes seemed to follow him as he moved. One portrait in particular sent shivers down his spine. It was a young woman with piercing blue eyes. Her gaze seemed to bore into him, filled with a mixture of sadness and warning. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was trying to tell him something. He turned away from the portrait, feeling a cold draft despite the stillness of the air. The scratched door. Deeper into the mansion, Ethan discovered a room at the end of a hallway. The air grew colder as he approached, and the silence was almost deafening. Each step he took echoed through the empty corridor, amplifying the sense of isolation and dread that hung in the air. Its door was covered in deep scratches. The marks were jagged and uneven, as if made in a frantic attempt to escape. The wood was splintered and worn, telling a story of desperation and fear. It looked like someone had been desperately trying to get out. The scratches varied in depth, some barely grazing the surface while others dug deep into the wood, almost as if the person had grown weaker over time. He reached for the doorknob, his heart pounding in his chest. He hesitated. The cold metal felt like ice against his skin, sending a shiver down his spine. His mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. A feeling of dread washed over him. His instincts screamed at him to turn back, to leave this place, and never return. But something kept him rooted to the spot, unable to tear his eyes away from the door. What if something was trapped inside? The thought sent a chill through his body. He imagined a creature, twisted and tormented, waiting just beyond the door, its eyes filled with malice and hunger. Or worse, what if something was waiting for him on the other side? The unknown was far more terrifying than anything he could conjure in his mind. The door seemed to pulse with a life of its own, beckoning him closer. He knew he should turn back. This felt different. This felt dangerous. Every instinct told him to run, to get as far away from this place as possible. But his curiosity, that insatiable need to know, kept him there. But curiosity, like always, got the better of him. He had to know what was behind the door. He had to see for himself. The fear was almost paralyzing, but the need to uncover the truth was stronger. He took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The hinges creaked loudly, echoing through the empty hallway. The door swung open slowly, revealing the darkness within. Ethan's heart raced as he stepped inside, ready to face whatever awaited him. The room was empty, except for a large ornate mirror standing against the far wall. The mirror's frame was intricately carved, with patterns that seemed to twist and turn in the dim light. It was the kind of mirror that seemed to hold secrets, whispering tales of the past to anyone who dared to look into it. Ethan cautiously approached it, his flashlight illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Each step he took echoed in the silence, amplifying the eerie atmosphere. The air was thick with the scent of age and neglect, and the floorboards creaked under his weight. He could have sworn he saw a figure standing behind him in the reflection. It was just a fleeting glimpse, but it was enough to send a shiver down his spine. The figure was shadowy, almost indistinguishable, but there was something undeniably human about it. He spun around, but there was no one there. The room was as empty as it had been when he first entered. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of his own breathing. He felt a chill run down his spine, as if the room itself was watching him. He turned back to the mirror, his heart racing. His reflection stared back at him, eyes wide with fear. He could feel his pulse quickening, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The mirror seemed to draw him in, compelling him to look deeper. This time there was no mistaking it. The figure was becoming clearer, more defined. It was as if the mirror was revealing a hidden truth, something that had been lurking just beneath the surface. The figure was clearer now. It was no longer just a shadow, but a distinct form. Ethan could see its features, its eyes, its expression. It was like looking at a ghost, a spectre from another time. It looked like him, but older, sadder. The reflection was a twisted version of himself, aged and weary. It was as if the mirror was showing him a possible future, a path he might take if he wasn't careful. Its eyes were filled with a profound sorrow. They seemed to bore into his soul, revealing a depth of pain and regret that was almost unbearable. It was a look that spoke of lost opportunities and unfulfilled dreams. He reached out to touch the mirror, his fingers coming away coated in dust. The surface was cold and unyielding, a stark contrast to the warmth of his own skin. The dust clung to his fingers, a tangible reminder of the mirror's age and history. As he watched, the reflection began to change. The sorrowful eyes shifted, the expression morphed. It was as if the mirror was alive, reacting to his presence. The figure in the mirror seemed to be trying to communicate with him, to tell him something important. Ethan felt a sense of urgency, a need to understand what the mirror was showing him. He leaned in closer, his breath fogging up the glass. The reflection continued to shift, revealing glimpses of different faces, different lives. It was a kaleidoscope of possibilities, each one more haunting than the last. Ethan knew he had to uncover the truth behind the mirror's reflection, no matter what it took. The reflection was no longer him. It was the ghostly figure of a young woman with piercing blue eyes, the same woman from the portrait. She reached out from the mirror, her hand passing through the glass as if it were water. Ethan stumbled back in terror, dropping his flashlight. The room was plunged into darkness. He could hear her voice, a mournful whisper echoing around him. He tried to run, but something held him fast. He felt a cold hand grip his arm, and then everything went black. The mansion was silent once more. Ethan was gone. The next morning the sun rose over the town. The Whitford Mansion stood on the hill as always, unchanged, or so it seemed. Inside, in the room with the portraits, something was different. There was a new addition to the collection, a portrait of Ethan hung on the wall. His eyes, once filled with curiosity, now held the same sadness and warning as the other portraits. He was trapped forever within the mansion's walls, another victim of its unseen horrors. The townspeople still whisper about the Whitford Mansion. They say the whispers inside have grown louder and more persistent. Some say they can hear Ethan's voice among them, calling out. They say he wanders the halls, searching for a way out. But the mansion holds its prisoners tight, never letting go. It is a place of shadows and secrets where the living are drawn to their doom. And the whispers never cease, echoing forever.